Moving on from data metrics, let's move to testing products, right? So testing, let's move to, can you explain to everyone what A/B testing is? And also, how do you decide which which features require A/B testing to be done?
So let's say you have two copies, right? Two headlines or two pricing models, right? One has 5 features for $5 a month. Another has 20 features for $7 a month.
Right.
Right now, you wanna know, can I do $6 a month in 15 features? Does that work or not? Right now, that is where we start to do testing. What we mean by testing is that we're gonna show two different things to a large number of similar sort of people and see which works better. Right now, how do we define which works better? It depend on feature to feature. Right, that is the basic premise of a A/B test. Now, A/B test implies that you have two versions of the same item hypothesis. It could be button, copy, landing page, proposition. It could be different pricing number. It could be different image. Depends on the higher the traffic you have, the more traffic number of people you have, the sheer sample you have, the more nuanced thing you can test.
Correct.
If you have just 1,000 customers visiting your websites a day, it'll take you 6 months to conclude an A/B test with some sort of statistical significance. It's not worth it, right? Might as well just take people's opinion in person and then do that sort of thing. But if you have 10,000 customers coming every minute, then you can even test facial expression of the same model, right? And do that sort of thing. So it depends on the traffic extreme there. And then you can also get into something called a multivariant testing, right? Where you test more than A and B variation. You have variation A, B, C, D, E, F. Those are multivariant testing. And typically what you're looking for, most people, what they will do, how they will start with A/B testing is they'll have two versions of landing page and see which one converts better, right? This is where marketing starts with A/B testing. Or you will start with two buttons on the copy and see which one gets clicked more. And there you're looking for statistical significance, which is another subject you must study in confidence intervals and statistical significance in data analytics. Critical for a product manager. Just because a 13% improvement came because you changed something does not mean anything without me looking at the statistical significance of that number, because it could be just 10 people, right? The rest of the funnel has 10% conversion rate with million people, and you said I did improvement to 30%, but 100 people this thing only did that. That says nothing. 30 people, 100 people can be noise in front of million people, right? So that is very becomes very important in sort of A/B testing world. And that is not the only kind of testing. If you go to the UX field, there's guerrilla testing you can do, because building a product costs money.
Right.
You can make prototype with your team, a high fidelity prototype with your design team. Go and test out with people, right? And do task-based testing, do card sort analysis. So you can use various UX methodologies to test, right? And use A/B test as the sort of last expensive sort of thing, right? And A/B tests should be done on very, in my opinion, should be done on nullable hypothesis only. What is a nullable hypothesis? A hypothesis that can be disproven. Yeah. So there's a famous scientific argument, which is teapot conjecture, I think, if I remember it correctly, which is, if I tell you that there is a flying teapot in orbit of the Earth, right? There's no way to prove or disprove this hypothesis. This is a very bad candidate for A/B test, right? So some CEO says, or your product manager or somebody comes up and says, hey, I like this image better than that image, right? Now, what does that mean? Does that have a business impact? So essentially what you're saying is, I also believe customer will like this image better than that image.
Right.
Now, like this image, what do you mean by like this image, right? That is why we try to objectify. Do you mean like this image in a sense, look at it? Or do you mean like this image as in it will be effective? Correct. It will be effective. I can measure conversion rate, but conversion rate will not depend on this image. So the image is irrelevant to the process, right? Unless you have super high traffic, I would not suggest testing in image. Unless it's a hero image and you're testing like humans versus illustration, that's an interesting concept. But again, if you're doing that sort of conceptual testing, right? Like illustration versus human being, you want to do guerrilla testing, or you want to talk to some of the human being along with A/B testing to see the psychological impact of what's happening. So you're not clueless as to why this worked, because sure, illustration work better. Now what? Why? You don't know how to build on top of it, right? So a better candidate for A/B testing is, does start free trial now, and start for free now works, right? 30-day free trial. That's an interesting proposition. Or no credit card required is works or not, right? Because that's people. My hypothesis: people are worried that I'll have to give my credit card. Nullable hypothesis, right? The moment you put that text there, if they were worried, they will click through more, right? So I can, with numbers, prove that the moment I added just that text, the CTR is increased, which gives us some confidence that yes, people were worried about this problem, right?
Okay.
One of the that is a good candidate for A/B test. So if you go like, this color is better than that color, it's non-nullable hypothesis, right? However, you will go like, oh, but Google is testing 50 shades of gray. What they are doing with their 50 shades of blue and gray in Google search is at their scale. Is it the wisest way to choose the best blue? No. And I can tell you, like, the more you do, the longer you do this test, as the screens evolve and everything, the shade of blue that works will keep evolving. So it's a never ending test, right?
Right.
Which works for them at their scale. They optimize for like perfect blue. It works, right? If you have that scale, go ahead. I don't know then why you're listening to this podcast, right? We should be listening to yours. But if you don't have that scale, then you should hyper stick to nullable hypothesis, a hypothesis which can be falsified, which can be proven wrong, right? So one of the recent A/B tests we did, and how we presented that test changed how we measured it. We used to have search button on mobile app. We have static tab bar and static header. There was search icon on tab bar and the header. We don't need two search icons, right? Now, which one is better? Is it top or is it bottom? You can A/B test, but before you A/B test, you must define your hypothesis. You must define opposite of what you were set out to prove, right? Marketing said top. These people said bottom. We were like, okay, our hypothesis is this. It does not matter, right, where you put this, because both are static, both are visible, right? And how do we know that? When we show some people this, when we show some people that, and we show some control group the existing version,
Right.
and then we do benchmarking, like search number of people who click on search button will not change,
Right.
right? And just to have a quality metric tied to it, also the click-through rate of people who look at those search results, or number of people who click on search and then actually search and then actually click on search result will also not change, which
Right.
means you're not targeting different people. It's the same behavior happening, right? So this is to assure that we are not lost in some sort of noise. And that was a nullable hypothesis. It was provable that yes, people could prefer one over the other. It is possible that CTR was higher. It is easier to find up or bottom. And that is where we describe the success of this one will be if there is not that much difference with certain confidence interval, then we conclude this test to be true. The hypothesis is true. It does not matter where you place the search, and that is what the conclusion was, right? And this hypothesis was generated in collaboration with designers.
Correct. So, like you said, A/B testing is like the last measure that's supposed to be taken, right? It's not like the first step that should be taken. It should be the last step if no other solution is reaching to a final conclusion. What are the drawbacks of not
Right.
using A/B testing correctly? What are the fallbacks?
The biggest pitfall I've seen people fall into is not they don't understand statistical significance and control, right? How do you properly design an A/B test? A poorly conducted A/B test can result in you making the wrong decisions, completely wrong decisions, and wrong interpretations out of that A/B test, right? Uh, like for example, if you don't for example, it's not properly randomized, which means a certain browser is most likely to go here and there, and you didn't do a baseline check. You will end up coming to a very, very wrong conclusion, and then whatever hypothesis you build later on, and whatever work you do later on based on that result will continue to fail, will not make sense, right? For example, and then people codify those sort of A/B tests like knowledge into the, oh no, we tested it, this works. Where is that A/B test data? We don't know. Like,
Right.
that sort of things start to happen because there was no strong hypothesis. It was just randomly tested, and one of them won. Nobody knows why. It was most likely random noise, right? So that is and without starting with a hypothesis and letting number decide your hypothesis and direction is super, super, super dangerous, right? Because then what, like, might as well put a random button generator, no, like, and let it test like every alphabet in the world. Like, there's no point in doing that sort of thing. You have to use your brain. Like, you can't build an iPhone doing A/B tests, right? You have to start with, but you can decide which one is better tactile feedback with an A/B test.
Correct.
Sure, you can do that sort of thing. So don't use A/B test for idea generation. Don't use A/B test for direction, choosing a direction between two sort of things, business direction. Use an A/B test for optimization. Use an A/B test to find, better of the two. Use an A/B test to find better copy, better placement, better proposition, better, accessibility, all those things. But don't let A/B tests guide you where to go.
Right.
Let A/B tests tell you whether you were right or wrong on a hypothesis. That's the only thing A/B test should be telling you. Anything more than that you're extrapolating from that A/B test, you are torturing the data to say what it does not want to say.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. So, Siddharth, I have last two questions. One of them is, since you mentioned randomness and you also mentioned control but held back, can you explain what control, randomness, and treatment is in terms of A/B testing? Now, that's one question. And the second question is, you've been mentioning you a lot of times about statistics. So, what kind of statistical data, like knowledge, should someone have if when they're trying to get into product management?
Right. I think love both of those questions. Let's start with one by one. What you mean by control? So when typically in A/B test, right, you have I have a certain landing page, right, and it says book now. Now I want to test some other copy, right? Now one way is for me to just launch that new copy and see what my conversion rate changed or not. That's not A/B testing, right? The problem with that is maybe a new news went out in the world, so everybody's behavior changed. You don't know. Maybe you also made some change in loading times. So what you do is you add a control. Control is typically one part which does not change, a certain population to whom you will not show any changes. And then you have this new population to whom you show the new changed version. Now, as if the world change across the behavior change across the world, everybody started doing UPI more. Let's say you're building a UPI this thing or booking more, right? Now you will see that on both control and the test, right? So it's something to ignore, right? But if you only see improvement in A and the control remains static, that's when you actually made an improvement. That is what control here is. In these days in COVID-19 drug trial, you will hear about randomized drug trial, right? Double-blinded randomized drug trial, which is also an A/B test, by the way, right? It's what they do is that they take two populations without them knowing, or the doctors who are treating them knowing. It's the double blinds part of it. They administer one placebo and one actual drug, which look as close to and taste as close to possible as to each other. Now, if placebo has an effect, they will see the same result in both. But placebo people don't show those improvements, but only this cohort shows that improvement when both of them don't know that they are being A/B tested. In A/B test, your customer obviously does not know they are getting A/B tested. That is the true benchmark of medical sciences, right? Now, we don't need to run double-blinded studies for our sort of thing, but a typical A/B test is typically blind study because the user is not aware they are being tested, right? Most of them are not. And that is where you start to get in, that sort of modeling comes in. And what I mean by random is that there was no preference between you assigning this person to this or that group, right? That is what randomized means. You are not deciding. It's not like all Safari people you send here. If you do that sort of thing, you're polluting your result, right? That's what randomized means in this context.
To sum it up,
and
the kind of group is a cohort that is where the feature is the same. There's no new improvement.
Right.
Treatment is the one in which the feature is changed and it's sent to that kind of cohort. And random is where it's undefined.
Random is unpreferred assignment, right? Unpreferred. There's no preference. There's no rationality or logic behind it, right? It's as come as with just sheer number, like send one here, send one here, send one here, send one here. I don't care who you are, just send one here, send one here, right? That is randomized trial. So, or randomizing your A/B test. Of course, you can do allocation of traffic. You can do 80-20, but as long as it's randomized, you should be able to do that sort of testing as well, where only 20% of people you roll out to, you still have a legit A/B test. But of course, and when it comes to statistics, start with 8th grade stats, right? What is distribution? What is variance? What is average? What is median? How does median different from the average? What does it mean when average in a data set is more than median? What does it mean when average is less than a median? Right? What is a long tail? What is a short tail? What is x-axis? What is y-axis? These basics you start with 8th grade maths, and then you will get deeper into statistical analysis, right? As a product manager, which is a whole very interesting. Like I'm there's actually, just hold on a second. I'm gonna show you the book. So these are the two books I've gotten to study for myself.
Can't see
Which
it,
is
bro.
one.
I think you should.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, awesome. Now I can see it. Bring it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I need to keep it like this. This
Yeah.
biostatistical analysis and probability and statistics, right? So this is what I'm studying. I am not even like one chapter through in either of them, but this is like what you get into.